live. Welcome everyone to this week's Rebel Finance School to the session. Today we're diving into one of the most important questions in financial independence, which is like, what's it all for? Why are we earning all this money? Why are we doing this? What's it all for, Katie?
Yeah, we've spent 10/11/12 weeks talking about investing your money, building your wealth, building your freedom fund. But money is just a tool. And the real question is, how do we use that to create a life that truly matters?
And to help us explore that, we're thrilled to have Jordan Grummett, also known as Doc G. He's a former hospice doctor who spent years at the bedside of people at the end of their life, hearing their biggest regrets, their deepest wishes, and those conversations changed the way he thinks about money and purpose.
So now Jordan is the host of the award-winning Earn and Invest podcast. He's the author of Taking Stock and the Purpose Code, and he blends medicine and money to help us answer the big question.
What's it all for?
What's it all for?
Now, this conversation could change the way we think about things, and that's what we're very excited. So please help us welcome the fabulous Doc G, Jordan, to the show. Welcome, Doc G. Please give him a huge round of applause, everyone. Show him some appreciation. YouTubers, some people are giving you lots of appreciation.
Gary says he loves the Earn and Invest podcast. Getting a lot of love, Jordan.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you here.
So to kick us off, Jordan, can you tell us a little bit about how you went from being hospice doctor to like figuring out financial independence and now what you do helping people find purpose? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, they don't go together. Explain yourself.
Believe it or not, it all happened many, many years ago. I was 7 years old. My father was 40. He was a cancer doctor. He went around at the hospital one morning, got a severe headache, and collapsed and died. He had a brain aneurysm. It burst. And I, as a 7-year-old, saw the world through my own lens. I thought if he died, it must be because I wasn't good enough. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't a good enough kid. And so I had this existential crisis where I decided that the way to make up for this cataclysmic event of my father dying was I was going to become a doctor just like him. And that's actually what I did. I worked my butt off. I studied when other people were having fun. I had a learning disability. I got over that. And I made the arduous trip into being a doctor. And this was the only thing I ever wanted to do. It was my sole version of purpose. It really excited me. I really wanted to do this. But then I became a doctor and practiced for a few years. And first of all, it didn't bring my father back, right? I was like, well, if I can just become a doctor, it's going to fix everything. And it didn't. And I thought I could save the world. And guess what? You can't save all of the patients. Some just die, and it's really sad. And I started to burn out. And I really got to the point where I'm like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. The only thing I thought that was possible was I need to make enough money so I never have to work again. That was the answer. Like, I didn't think I could do anything else or I had any other skills. And so I went to my financial advisor, my accountant, and they both gave me these crazy numbers like $10 million. And I didn't have $10 million, so I figured I had to just keep working. And then this guy, Jim Dolly, sent me his book. He's the White Coat Investor. He wrote a book called The White Coat Investor. It's for doctors, high net worth individuals, on how to manage their finances. And it taught me about this concept of financial independence. And all of a sudden, I'm like, wow, there's this thing called financial independence. You can calculate a number. You can use that number to retire. And because my parents had modeled such great behavior, like I owned real estate, I invested in the stock market, I had run businesses before. So it was like, I actually found I had enough money. I probably could leave this job I didn't love, which should have been the happiest day of my life. But instead I had a panic attack when I realized that I had no idea who I was or what I would do outside of medicine. And over the next bunch of years, I slowly got rid of everything I didn't like in medicine because I realized I had enough money. I didn't have to be doing these things. But the one thing I loved doing was hospice care. I had kind of stumbled into that when I was taking care of lots of geriatric patients, and the hospice team who was seeing my patients asked if I would work with them. And I said, sure, why not? It was like a side hustle. I could make extra money, but I ended up loving it. So I got rid of everything I was doing in medicine except hospice care because that I would do even if I wasn't making any money. It kind of lit me up. But then I had a bunch of free time. So I started writing a financial blog because it was my personal finances that allowed me to get away from this thing that was draining my soul. And I started a podcast, and I'd have people like you guys on but also people who are not nearly as intuitive as you, some business owners, authors, financial independence people. And I'd ask them at the end of our conversation, so you've now told us how to become financially independent or make lots of money. What is it in service for? Like, what's enough money and what are you going to do with this? And I'd get a lot of blank stares. And strangely enough, I started finding answers in an unexpected place. You see, it was my hospice patients who actually had a better answer because they would talk about their lives and none of them would say, I wish I made more money. Like no one said on their deathbed, I wish I had made $2 million, but I only made 1 million in my lifetime. None of them said, I wish I would have worked more nights or weekends. They all said, I really regret that I never had the energy, courage, or time to. And then it was a fill in the blank. Like what was important to them that they never had the courage to do. And I realized, I'm like, what if I could take that message to all my financial people? What if I could have them do that exercise where they imagined they were on their deathbeds? What would they regret? And that became my first book, Taking Stock. And that's why I started writing about the intersection between hospice, personal finance advice, and eventually purpose. Because my conclusion on writing that book, Taking Stock, was that we should probably be putting our purpose first and then building a financial framework around it. Little did I know when I went out into the world after this book was out and I started talking at conferences about this idea that I then get more pushback on this idea that, well, you keep telling me to find my purpose, but I have no idea how to do that. Been looking for my purpose forever. And in fact, I don't think there is a purpose. And they'd be really frustrated and they'd be angry at me. And that actually led me to do the research and eventually write my second book, The Purpose Code, because I realized that you can tell people, oh, just go out and find your purpose. But telling them that doesn't actually help. Just like telling someone just pursue financial independence doesn't help. You actually have to teach them how. I realized that purpose was kind of similar. There are a set of steps you can take. And if you just take the right steps, just like you can become financially independent, you can actually live a purposeful life. And so that's what I've set out to do.
Wow. That is such a cool
That
story.
is one heck of a
There's
story.
so much to unpack. There's so many different threads we could pull on there. And like, what a unique perspective that you've had, Jordan, to be able to use that, like the insights you can get from people that are at the end of their lives to help us to live our lives when hopefully we're a long way from that. And I think as you were speaking, I was really curious. You said that as a hospice doctor, that's what lit you up. That's what you enjoyed. What was it about that you enjoyed so much?
So here's the beautiful thing about hospice care. When I would go see patients, the doctors and nurses and people who saw them before me would say some version of, there's nothing more we can do. So imagine you're sitting in bed or your relative is sitting there in bed in the hospital and someone has basically shook their head and said, there's nothing more we can do. You feel horrible. Well, as a hospice doctor and as the hospice team, we come in and we say, no, 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 no. It's true. We're not going to fix your disease, but we can control your pain. We can control your nausea. We can get you home if that's where you want to be. We can make sure the important people are around you, and we can help you live until the moment you die. And that's extremely uplifting. So people ask me all the time, isn't hospice depressing? And I say, no, actually, it's the least depressing part of medicine I've ever done. In the rest of medicine, we're continuously fighting against a demon, a disease process that often we can't win against. But in hospice, we've already accepted that demon. We've already accepted that reality. And our sole job is to make people's lives better. And I dig that. Even as the doctor, a lot of what I do is give orders and talk to nurses over the phone. But those nurses and the certified nursing assistants and the chaplains and the social workers are literally at the bedside, changing diapers, holding hands, and doing all the hardest work that anyone does, right? And my job is I get to support them. Like they text me and they need something, I answer them right away. I make sure they have the orders. I make sure they have the support to do that really hard work. And I have no other way to look at that except uplifting. And so I always say I would be a hospice doctor even if no one paid me for it. I don't mind that they do. But that's how I know it was a piece of being a doctor that felt truly purposeful. Like I didn't have to get rid of the baby with the bathwater. Like I could get rid of all the things I didn't like. But there was this one piece of purpose and identity that I was able to hold on to, which was very gratifying because, as you guys know, I worked really hard to become a physician. I mean, during residency, you work 36, sometimes even 48 hours in a row without sleep. Like, this is no joke. So it was nice to not have to just walk away from it completely.
So do you still do those shifts then, Jordan, or is that something you stopped doing now?
I still work in hospice about 10 to 15 hours a week. I manage two teams. It's about 100 and something, 150 patients or so. But it's something that I don't feel much anxiety, stress, or pressure around. So it kind of integrates into my normal daily routine. I answer texts. I go to meetings once a week, and it's a very enjoyable way actually still to practice.
That's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Um, Slight tangent. Uh, Keisha asked, is the Earn and Invest song from the Revolutionaries inspired by your podcast?
I sure hope it is.
Yes, it is.
I've been lucky enough to know Alan and Katie for a long time. And they have been on the podcast years and years ago, even before it was called the Earn and Invest podcast. And so I was lucky enough that they decided to incorporate the podcast into their music. It was a pleasure and a privilege.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Jordan.
We can't get the song out of our heads at sometimes. We pop along going, Earn and Invest.
It's still going on right now as we're talking. So yeah.
Um, so your tagline essentially is, what's it all for? Why is this question so important for people who are sorting out their finances?
Because we mistake our finances as winning the game. And this is the thing. I grew up in the financial independence, retire early space. And so I'd see all these people who are striving so much to get to financial independence. And it became the main thing they thought, talked about, the main people they interacted with. And then what happened? Then they got there and they had all the same problems and all the same issues. And they just happened to have money, which solved one problem, right? They could leave their job if they wanted to. But most of us have existential issues that are far beyond just work. And so the idea is winning the game is not having enough money to quit work. Winning the game is having enough money to build the life you want to live. And so financial independence helps with that. But you don't have to wait till you're financially independent in order to use that financial framework to start doing things that light you up. And at some point, God forbid, we're all going to get old enough to die. We want to know that we spent most of our time doing things that were important to us, not things that someone told us we should do, not looking at our net worth every day and hoping it would go higher. We want to engage with people and do things that light us up. And that's kind of what winning looks like. Winning is looking at your calendar and being like, wow, 95% of my time is doing things I love, and maybe only a percent or two is doing things I loathe. Money is a great tool to get there. It's not the only tool. But I had all these people that I hung out with who had really accumulated tons of that tool, but they weren't actually using it to take the next step, which is to live the life that really felt fulfilling. And so that's kind of my message to all of you. It's great to think about money, and I'm happy you are because it's important, but only as important as it allows you to live the life you want to live.
I absolutely love that. And we had exactly the same experience seeing people that had amassed fortunes and then were not happy and lost.
Yeah.
We met a bunch of people who quit work and then went back to work because they're lost and they're like, well, I don't know what to do. And we needed a purpose when we finished work, and we're like, well, our purpose is, we'll just make this up. Our purpose is help people sort their finances. So we just made it up, created a course, and then started teaching people how to get on top of their money. So we have seen this, and that's part of the journey.
Because I had that when we like crossed the number and we didn't have to work anymore. I knew that it wouldn't suddenly mean that all my problems would melt away, but I was still surprised when that didn't happen. And I was like, oh, aren't I supposed to be like rainbows and unicorns and jumping out of it, being ecstatically happy? Like, oh, like this has been missold to me, and it wasn't missold at all. Like I just ignored the part where people were like, you need to like work on your happiness and know what you're doing as well. And like hearing that from Alan all the time. And I was like, oh yes, lovely, darling, we'll get to that. And then that time came and I was like, oh, now I have to like actually work on the important stuff.
And you know what's really beautiful about the message is it's twofold. Being financially independent won't solve all your problems. So let's start doing the work and thinking about what really does light us up. But the other side of that is you don't necessarily have to be at financial independence to start living a life that feels more true and purposeful to you. And so money is a tool, but it's not the end all be all solution, nor is it the destination. It's just the hammer to our nail, but we know we can't solve every problem by putting a nail in wood, right? Sometimes you need a screwdriver and a screw and not a nail or a hammer. And so that's kind of the excitement is that it frees us on both sides of the equation, whether we're financially independent or not.
You're saying you don't have to wait to start living that way. So how, Jordan? I'm hearing like, how do we do, like you're saying we don't have to wait and, start living this purposeful life. How do we do this?
Yeah, Rangalang on YouTube says, "How do we find purpose? I've been looking for a long time. It's not easy to
Ah.
find. You can't pick it up at Best Buy."
Oh, this is a setup question. Yes. So what I always tell people is you don't find purpose. That's the mistake. You actually build or create purpose. So it is an active process. But you are right. We do need to know what those inklings back in those. Well, you don't find purpose, you build it. Did you guys lose me for a second?
Well, I think we did lose you for a second, yeah, but you're back now.
Okay, good. So I always tell people you don't going to tell you to start building life.
Oh, we're losing signal a bit, Jordan.
That might be us, though.
Well, Mark was blinking at me.
Yeah, can you see me now or am I still?
Is it us or you, Jordan?
Yeah,
I
it's one
can't
of those
tell.
moments. Like, is it us? Is it you? Is it Mark?
Everyone's
Whose
saying
fault is it?
everyone's blaming you, Jordan.
Everyone's blaming
This
Jordan.
is part of how to live a purposeful life. Blame Jordan.
Is to have a good internet. I will say our internet occasionally, for whatever reasons, kind of slows down, but
You seem to be back now, so it's all good. And we did, before you start again with the purpose bit, we did have one comment saying financial independence will solve my problems with my commute.
Yeah, I don't have to deal with
yes.
my problems with the M62, which is a motorway in the UK, will go away when retiring, mostly.
So I'm going to jump back in though, this idea of finding purpose. Remember, I kind of said you don't find it, you build it, but we do need to know the inklings or beckonings. Those are the kind of whisperings or what I call purpose anchors, things to build purpose around. But I also want to redefine purpose before we even get to those purpose anchors. Part of the problem is I think we all kind of misdefine purpose. We think that it has to be big and audacious and impactful and change the world. It's what I call big P purpose. But the problem with that is it often sets us up to be anxious. So a lot of times we set these big audacious goals, which we don't necessarily have the agency to achieve. We're not the right person at the right time, saying the right things, doing the right things with a lot of luck. And so if your goal is to have six-pack abs or run a seven-figure business or travel the world all the time or wear the nicest clothes, a lot of us don't have agency to do those things that we see on TikTok and Instagram and all of our influencers. And so if you go for goal-oriented purpose, it's very scarcity mindset oriented because very few people will succeed and it feels very all or nothing. What I like to push people towards is what I call little p purpose. Instead of being goal-oriented, this is process-oriented purpose. And so all you have to think about is what could I really enjoy the process of doing regardless of the goal? And when you look at it that way, it's very abundant. And instead of being all or nothing, it's all or all. So what I'm really talking about is the difference between big P purpose and little p purpose. And I think little p purpose lights us up. Studies show that purpose in general, having a sense of purpose in life, leads to more health, happiness, and longevity. But other studies show that up to 92% of people at some point have something called purpose anxiety. It means the idea of purpose causes them to be anxious and frustrated. In my opinion, big P purpose causes the anxiety and the frustration. Little p purpose causes that health, happiness, and longevity. So how do we find it? We don't find it, we build it. But what are the purpose anchors we build it around? I always tell people there are 3 or 4 really easy exercises you can do to start thinking about your purpose anchors. One is the one that I learned from my hospice patients. I call it a regret audit, which is just that very basic question. If I found that I was lying on my deathbed and I had a week to live, what would I regret never having the energy, courage, or time to do? That simple sentence, if you can answer it, Whatever you regret not doing, we can actually turn that around into a purpose anchor. Like, why aren't you doing it now then? 10 years ago, when I asked myself that question, the answer was I'd really regret not having traditionally published a book if I hadn't done it. And so I knew 10 years ago that this could become a purpose anchor, and I did indeed build a life of purpose around it. Now, it wasn't easy. Like, I had to find an agent. I had to talk to tons of people who wrote books. I had to study how to be a better writer. All of those things were actions I had to take, but they were in support of my little p purpose and they lit me up. So even if I didn't end up publishing that book, it still would have been a joyful process. So that's one way, is a regret audit. Another way is the joys of childhood. I always tell people, what lit you up when you were a kid? Have you ever noticed little kids, especially before the digital age, would go out and play all day and get lost and forget to come home for dinner? They would be biking throughout the city all day long, or they'd be building a fort or playing basketball. That's what I call a flow state. When you get so lost in doing something, you stop caring about the outcome, you stop realizing that time is passing. Little kids understand purpose totally. But then you get told you got to go to school and you got to make a living, and we drop all that stuff we loved to get serious. So I always tell people, like, what were the pictures in your room? What were the paintings and drawings? What were the trophies that you won? Those could all become purpose anchors. For me, that was baseball cards. When I was a kid, I loved baseball cards. Now when I'm on Facebook, every time I see something about baseball cards, my brain lights up. I happen to be busy enough where I don't have time to pursue that purpose anchor, but it certainly could be one if I wanted it to be. Another real good way to start thinking about purpose anchors is what I call the art of subtraction. I tell people, if you are still working, look at your job and write down your 10 or 11 responsibilities. And I want you to take a pen and start scratching out all the ones that you don't like, don't fulfill you, or at least are meh, right? And then what's left over? Is there one or two things you really love there? If there is, maybe that's a purpose anchor, and you can start building some purpose around those things outside of work or inside. That was my hospice example. When I got rid of everything I didn't like about being a doctor, hospice remained, and that became a purpose anchor. Last but not least, if any of those other things don't work, a really easy way to find purpose anchors is the spaghetti method. Throw a bunch of spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. Try things that make you a little uncomfortable. Say yes to things you normally say no to. Hang out with people you normally don't hang out with, like here at the Rebel Finance School presentation. Meet new people, etc. But the idea is to try something new. And if it ended up being a good day and you enjoyed yourself, that could be a purpose anchor.
So I love all those ideas, Jordan. That gives people, I love that. It's very actionable of like, okay, here's what I can actually do to find this, like, this little P purpose. So once you've got those anchors, what do I do next? So like, I've discovered that the thing I like about my job is making spreadsheets and graphs.
Which is factually correct for Katie.
So like, what do I do with that? Like, now what do I just all my time doing spreadsheets and graphs and just like...
So here's the beauty of it. Here's where the abundance comes in. You could start a blog about spreadsheets and graphs. You could start a podcast about spreadsheets and graphs. You could start doing seminars, webinars, and teach people how to make spreadsheets and graphs. You could build a beautiful spreadsheet and graph for other people to use. You could join Spreadsheet and Graphs Anonymous, where you get together with people who have the same love and talk about your frustrations about how the rest of the world doesn't understand it. You could start a business having to do with this. You could do free teaching sessions where you help busy business people learn how to better spreadsheet. You could help people in the financial independence movement keep better track of their budgets. I can think of so many different things you could do. This is abundance. And here's the funny part. I do a bunch of coaching, right? And part of my coaching is we do this whole big spreadsheet, actually, where we look at people's different purpose anchors. And I've done this now with 30 or 40 people. I've never found a person who didn't have at least 15 or 20 purpose anchors. And so 15 or 20 purpose anchors times all the different activities you could do around that purpose anchor. Think about how abundant it is. Most of the people I coach aren't stuck with trying to figure out what purpose looks like. They're stuck with the fact that they have so many possibilities. They don't know how to narrow down and just pick one or two.
How do you coach people through that? Because that me, I'd be like, oh, but there's so many.
The dartboard.
I want to like
the dartboard.
Do all of them,
Here's
Jordan.
the thing.
But you've given me 15, 20 anchors. So, now I want to do them all. So I have to pick
let me tell you what really matters. The actual activity doesn't matter. What matters and why you can take a dart, throw it at the dartboard and pick the one or two it hits, or three or four, why it doesn't matter is take any of these things that light you up. When you do things that light you up, you show up as your best self. And like a moth to a flame, you attract other people, and those people become your community, your friends, your support. And if you really look at the data about happiness, remember I just said having a sense of purpose is associated with health, happiness, and longevity. If you really look at the data about happiness, one of the best studies is the Harvard Developmental Adult Health Study. And it studied people starting with people who went to Harvard back in the early 1900s. They took hundreds of those people and they put them through questionnaires every 2 years. Then they brought in their family members. Then they brought in people from the Boston area's controls. And they followed these people for 80 years. They started with just questionnaires, but eventually did blood tests, MRIs. They collected all sorts of data. And after 80 years of studies, the one thing they found most associated with happiness was not achievements. It was not money. It wasn't even purpose. And I'll get back to that in a moment. What they found was most associated with happiness was interpersonal connections. So here's why purpose is important. If you follow little p purpose and do things that light you up, it will connect you to other people, and those will become your connections, your deep, enduring connections, and that's why you will be happier. Look at Alan and Katie. This business, this community, the people listening right now are because they followed their little p purpose, not because they were going to do something to conquer the world or make $1 million. They did something that lit them up, that excited them, that attracted to other people. And now they have a community which provides them for traveling all around the world and meeting all sorts of interesting people and collaborating. This is what happiness looks like. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which purpose anchor you choose, and it doesn't matter how much time you spend on it or whether you drop it and pick up another purpose anchor. What matters is you do things that get you into that flow state where you're lit up and just totally enjoying yourself. If you do that, I dare you not to connect to other people. I dare you. It's impossible.
I absolutely love that. We have this thing of like, we get to the end of day and it's like, damn, why am I tired?
It's
I don't
very
want to be
irritating.
tired. I have more things to do. I have more people to talk to. And yeah,
It's abundance. But what am I hearing in your voice? Purpose, abundance, connection. None of that has anything to do with money. And I would take the risk of saying that if you had done some of the stuff before reaching financial independence, you would have had the same result. Still been maybe a little stressed about your jobs. Maybe you would have had to fit it into nights and weekends. But the effect would have been the same, financially independent or not financially independent. Money's just a great tool. It gives you a little more time, doesn't it?
gives you a lot more time. And I think I was very lucky because I was running Rebel Business School. Like that was my way of generating income. So I actually was able to earn money and live my purpose.
Which is fantastic. Yeah.
You don't feel like you're working. And we had a comment on YouTube from Summer who said, I loved gardening and hanging out with my grandparents as a kid. I've created a business with the help of Rebel Business School where I help the elderly with their gardens.
Yeah.
Which is.
And again, let's talk about success. When you do things like that, you tend to show up as your best self because it lights you up. You're more likely to attract other people, right? So people who want to buy from you are going to come. People who want to collaborate with you want to come. People who have ideas on how to improve your business are going to want to come. But here's what's so fantastic about that. If the business doesn't work, you still enjoyed the process and did something deeply important to you. Like we always hope the business works. And I do believe when you do things that light you up, your chance of success is much higher. But even if it wasn't amazingly successful, you still, what I call won the game, which meant you took your days, your weeks, your months, your years, and you filled them with purposeful, joyful activity. Because time passes no matter what you do, and you can't buy, sell, or trade it, but you can control a little bit of what activities you are involved with as time passes. Winning the game is doing stuff you love and getting rid of stuff you loathe. So do stuff you love in this precious little time that's passing us every moment. That's how you win the game.
I love
That's
it.
it.
You're talking about time, Jordan, which a lot of people listening to this will still be working. They've got busy jobs, they've got busy lives, they've got responsibilities with their kids, with their elderly parents. If someone's feeling time pressured and that there is no time to start doing this like little P stuff, where should they start? What should they do?
Well, first and foremost, let's talk about not having time. So I can't speak to every person in every situation. What I can tell you is the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the United States does something called the American Time Survey. And they do it, and they continuously update it every year. And basically, their studies show that your average American at least has between 4.5 and 5 hours of leisure time a day. So to say that you don't have time, at least for your average American, just isn't true. A lot of times people don't think they have time is because they think of purpose is big, audacious purpose, which means it has to be like deep and involved and difficult. But if you start thinking about little p purpose, which is, hey, I like to garden and it lights me up. And when I go to the community garden and there's other people working around me, it's really fun. Well, you can do that an hour on a Sunday, right? Like if you truly have 5 hours of leisure a day, you can spend an hour, a half an hour reading a book or walking along the lake or hanging out with your kids and doing something fun. These are all things that are much more possible when you start thinking about little p purpose. But I want to remind everyone, remember I just talked about winning the game. Very simple. Doing more that you love during those precious amounts of time that are fleeting, that we have no control over, and doing less that you loathe. Even if you're working 50 or 60 hours a week, you still have some extra time here and there. And that might be a 5-minute meditation session if you love doing that. That might be a night out with friends at the local watering hole, if that's what it is. That might be a bike ride. Even for the people who are the busiest, even fitting just a few minutes in here or there, that was time that was filled with something not particularly special, and you just put something special there. You've already started to win the game, even if it's just that 5 extra minutes of doing something you like.
Yeah, it's interesting. Kate on YouTube made an interesting comment saying, for those people, is it about time or is it about energy? And we've noticed over the years that quite often people get to the end of the day and it's maybe 8 p.m., 9 p.m., and they have some time, maybe an hour before bed or something, but they have no energy. And we've definitely noticed energy is our biggest barrier, problem, limiting factor. I don't know what the correct word is.
We run out of energy before we run out of time.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, so yes, in the life I live right now, time feels exceedingly abundant. Like I feel like I have a million hours to do what I want to do. But I would put it this way. A lot of people have trouble building the energy to do the things they want to do when they feel a lack of agency. So if you're like, I don't have any time and I'm stuck in this job I don't like and I have no idea what purpose looks like in my life, it's really hard to feel energetic. On the other hand, when you find you have a sense of autonomy and agency, like, well, I can't control work, but I love gardening and I love my community garden and I'm showing up there when I do have time and I'm hanging out with friends, it energizes everything else. It energizes the workplace. It energizes your free time. Just feeling that sense of autonomy and agency, just feeling like there's something that really lights me up and I can pursue it, is actually energizing, not depleting. So I think a big problem with people nowadays is because they don't know what purpose looks like in their life, it all just feels depleting. Like if your calendar is filled mostly with things you loathe and very few things you love, how are you going to feel energetic? But the answer is not to say I need more rest, although we all need good rest. The answer is how can we start slowly flipping that calendar? Even if it's just adding in a few minutes here or there, something you love, I think you'll notice a difference in your energy.
I love that. Yeah, because everyone has a couple of minutes to do something with the little p purpose stuff.
Yeah,
and I think that will improve your energy, not decrease it.
Yeah, which kind of brings us back to one of the things you said about subtracting the things from your life that you don't enjoy, and a little bit of homework for everyone. Make a list of everything that kills your energy, drains your energy, and see if you can get rid of it from your life and do more of the things that bring you energy and help you feel good. That is Julie screamed housework in the chat. I don't know whether that was in response to what I said or whether she just loves doing housework. I'm unsure whether that lights her up or takes it away, but who knows? Next question, Katie. So how does this all tie together with money, Jordan? How does like the purpose, the money tie together and bring us together?
So we want to win the game, but what are the tools we have available? Well, money is a great tool, right? If you have money, you could retire early, which means you just took something, a 40-hour block of doing things maybe you don't love and gotten rid of it. If you don't like cleaning your house and you have money, you can hire someone else to clean your house, which frees that time up so that you can fill it with fulfilling activities. So building a financial framework makes a huge amount of sense because you want to use that money as a tool. But I also want to remind people it's one of many tools. So again, if you don't have money, that doesn't mean everything is lost. What do I mean by this? Well, it is true, money's a great tool. But let's say you're 22 years old and you're working 60 hours a week or 50 hours a week doing the, Monday through Friday thing. And you're like, I hate my job, but I just am trying to put money on the table. Well, what other tools do you have? You don't have a lot of money, but maybe at 22, you don't have a mortgage, you don't have kids, you don't own a house. So maybe on Sunday, you can do something that lights you up. Maybe for an hour or two on Sunday, go do something you like. You have the tools of youth, you have the tools of energy, you have the tools of not having these other responsibilities. You're not going to the kids' basketball game at 2 p.m. on Sunday. You have all these other tools and you can start utilizing those. Maybe you start a side hustle. Maybe you start gardening because you love gardening and it lights you up and you sell some of your vegetables at a local market. Maybe that creates a little money. Maybe you then use that money to work slightly less, to cut your hours down. Or maybe you just use it as margin to hire someone to clean your house so you get a little bit more free time. In that scenario, you haven't cut down your work at all. You've not only benefited from the joy of addition, you've added in this thing, gardening, which you love, but now you've made a little bit of money and you could subtract cleaning in your house because you can hire a house cleaner. Boom, you've just made a huge difference in your life and money had very little to do with it. Well, maybe that won't work for you. Maybe you have the tool of a close family. And so you're 22 and you're in this job you hate and your mom and dad live down the street. Well, maybe you can stop renting an apartment and go live with your mom and dad. Maybe they don't charge you rent. And now all of a sudden you just saved a few $1,000s a month. You were paying for rent before, but now you're using your tool of your family, your relationships. And now you can use that few $1,000s a month to take skiing lessons because you want to learn how to downhill ski, which is the joy of addition of adding in joyful activities of your life. Or you use it to work, less of a work week. Maybe instead of 60 hours, you have enough money now, you can work 40 or 45 hours. Either way, we find that money is a great tool, but don't rely on it as the only tool. Use your relationships, your skills, your knowledge, your passion, all of those things as tools to start adding in more joyful activities, subtracting out more loathsome activities. And if all else fails, you substitute, right? I hate my job. Maybe you go to the competitor across the way who either is a better employer or maybe pays you more. Substitution. Any of these levers we can use all of our tools, and we can then build a life that has more purpose and less loathsome activities. And again, we're using all these tools to win the game. So money's a great tool. Just remember, it's not the only tool.
So you talked about adding more things that you like and getting rid of things that you loathe. Excuse me. Does that extend to people, Jordan? Should I be getting rid of people I loathe? Asking for a friend.
Just not significant others, but maybe other people. I don't know. Yes, of course. I think if you have people in your life who bring you down, question the things you do, who look at your life and say, oh, why are you spending time gardening? You should really be at work getting the next promotion. If those people don't help you create a bigger, beautiful, happier life, maybe you should spend less time with them. Remember, time is precious and we have zero control over it. you really don't want to waste that time, or at least spend that time doing things you don't like doing with people you don't want to be with who bring you down. When you only get so much of it, you'd much rather substitute in something else. You'd rather be doing a different activity in that time than spending it with someone who doesn't make you feel good.
So a lot of people that discover the idea of figuring out their finances and they think, well, maybe I can go aggressively towards financial independence. I can invest so much of the money that I'm making. And then they're like, but how do I make sure that I'm enjoying my life along the way? Am I going to have to, sacrifice the joy along the way? Would the answer to that be the little p purpose as well? How do you balance those two things, or would you say you don't actually have to balance them at all?
Well, I think you have to be aware. So I love to tell this parable. It's called the parable of the three brothers, but it's pretty much the three paths to financial independence. And one of the paths, the first path, is the path of front loading the sacrifice. And what you're really saying is, I'm going to take important things like purpose and identity. I'm going to put them aside a little bit, and I'm going to grind it out and make lots of money until I'm 35 or 40 or 45 or whatever your financial independence age is, where you have enough money invested to support you. And then you're going to leave that job that you've been grinding at and live a life full of purpose, identity, and connections. That's one choice. And you certainly can make that choice if you want, but you don't have to, right? So there's some other paths to financial independence. There's passive income and side hustles. Maybe allows you to get to financial independence a little faster, because instead of getting this huge net worth number, instead you're really trying to get enough passive income and side hustle income to cover your monthly needs. And so you can bring purpose and identity into your life either with that side hustle or passive income if you enjoy it. But even if you don't, you can usually get to financial independence faster than if you just grind it out for 10 or 15 years and start bringing purpose, identity, and connections into your life sooner. Or you could even take the passion play path, which is the last path I often talk about, which is if you do something you love that also happens to pay the bills, you're kind of financially independent from day one. And so I think you get to choose. But even if you choose to grind it out, you probably can bring in some little p purpose at different times in your life. But I also want you to realize there are some downsides to just grinding it out. So the first one is you could be like my father. My father died at 40. And so he never made it to financial independence. So if you're putting off all the good stuff to get to financial independence, there's the sad case that you might not make it. You might die soon. There's the other realization that the seasons of our lives are short and they pass. So let's say you're 22 or 23 and you get this wonderful job. You're making a lot of money. You don't love it, but you're grinding it out. And you happen to meet the love of your life. Well, you only get the honeymoon period where you're like just met someone and are like during that kind of newlywed honeymoon period only lasts so long. And if you're too busy working during that time, by the time you're 50 and you're retired, that moment is gone. Or like when you have young kids, like the infant and toddler years come and go quickly. And if you're too busy at work during those years, yeah, you can spend a lot of time with them when you're 45 or 50 and you're retired, but that season of their lives and your life is gone. And so I think as long as you're thoughtful about which path you take, if you decide that path of grinding it out, it's fine. But just be aware. I mean, everything comes at a cost.
So if you're watching this now, we have Doc G from the Earn and Invest podcast and author of The Purpose Code with us, talking all about purpose and is money really the thing we're after. We're very excited to have him here. If you're on YouTube, please hit like, send us a comment. And if you're listening right now, do put your questions for Doc G. If you're on Zoom, put them in the question and answer bit so that we can see them. If you're on YouTube, I will keep an eye on your messages. We have a big screen showing all your messages. So we will ask the questions of Doc G as we go through. And just to build on what Doc G said, our friend Matt was following his path to financial independence, and he had kids, and he sent us, we were going to Chautauqua and we met Mr. Money Mustache, and he sent us to Mr. Money Mustache to answer the question, should I work hard and earn the money, or should I spend more time with my kids? And Mr. Money Mustache, Pete, said, do you like your kids? Was the question. Which I thought was just a wonderful analytical, do you actually like them?
So it's gone into a flow chart, isn't it? It's like kids, yes, no. Okay, so assume yes.
And he said, yes, I love my kids. He said, well, then take your foot off the pedal and spend more time with them, because those years go very quickly.
They do.
Did you learn anything from the hospice patients about time and how it flows and what they thought about time?
Yeah, I mean, what I really got most from my hospice patients is that life gets ahead of you, and unless you specifically make the time, there will be things that you keep putting off, and then one day you'll be told that you have a terminal illness. And if you didn't put the time into doing these things, it's going to be gone. Like if you look at Bronnie Ware's The Five Regrets of the Dying, she wrote a book. She's a hospice nurse. She did palliative care. And a lot of them essentially connect to this idea that I never had the courage to be the person that I wanted to be and to do the things that were important to me. And so I really do think time is fleeting. And I will say I live a life where I feel lots of time abundance because I spend most of my time doing things I really like to do. So it feels like my days are long and full. Um, but it's really easy to lose track of the years. Like the days are long, but the years go quickly. And so if you don't mark the moment and say, I don't know how much time I ever have left, you're going to put off doing this really hard work. The term is memento mori, this idea of always to walk the world with this idea that death is near, because it'll make you spend the time to do the things you want to do. And I think we've got to be really thoughtful about that.
I'm curious if there were any patients that had felt, were there patients that didn't have regrets? Were there patients that had lived their purposeful life?
Oh,
Or is
for
there,
sure.
and how, I'm curious, like, I want to put a number on this, Jordan, like what percentage was that? Like, and what were the commonalities of those people? Like who, I'm really curious to know how I
Yeah, I
can.
mean, so, and also realize this is a continuum, right? There are people who had parts of their lives which were really great, and then parts of their lives they have regrets about. But ultimately, and this is kind of where the ideas from the book stem from, ultimately, the happiest people were the people who did things that lit them up and it connected them to those around them, right? It was the people who fought the valiant fight, who got into the middle of the arena and tried and tried and tried and often failed valiantly. Like you want your life to be full. And this is one thing that people don't realize. They're like, oh, little p purpose. Well, it sounds kind of easy. That's not what I'm saying at all. Like part of little p purpose is doing the hard stuff, the stuff that you'll probably fail at. Like if your dream as a young person is to become a professional basketball player, you should try to become a professional basketball player. And you may fail horribly, and that's totally okay. Like we want to live most of our lives in the arena fighting the valiant fight, which means we want to do the hard things. And so the happiest people I saw were not the people who succeeded always. It were the people who had the courage to try and be most themselves because it mostly connected them to other people. It gave them a sense of accomplishment to be giving it their best, whether they succeeded or not. And I think that's really what it comes down to. I often talk about someone, I talked about this in my first book, Taking Stock. You know, I took care of a gentleman who was dying of leukemia in his 40s, but in his 20s, he was like in the midst of corporate America and he was moving his way up and he did something no one could understand. He took a year sabbatical and went to climb Mount Everest. It was a dream of his. And so he trained for 6 months, then he went. And while he was on the mountain, the weather changed and they had to come back down. He never succeeded, went back to corporate America. And I met him in his 40s when he was dying of leukemia, and all he wanted to do and talk about to the nurses and the staff was what it felt like to be on the mountain. And it wasn't that he failed, that wasn't what he talked about. He just talked about what it felt like to be doing this thing in nature that he had so wanted to try. And so, like, that's what I remember is the people who had the courage to put themselves out there and do the hard stuff. Like, what speaks to you? Like when you're about to fall asleep at night, what do you dream about? And have you pursued it? Like what was the thing or what is the thing that lights you up that you're afraid to tell everybody about? And why aren't you pursuing these things or at least thinking about them?
That's so important. It made me think, so if, is there a danger that if I get caught up in my little p purpose, that I won't pursue those harder things. Like I could kind of say to myself, well, I'll just like play on my own with my spreadsheets and graphs and never do that bigger stuff that you're talking about, the stuff where you're like fighting the valiant fight, doing the stuff that really matters.
Here's the mistake. People hear me say big P purpose and little P purpose, and what they think it means is big P purpose is the big, impactful, important stuff, and little P purpose is just doing something for yourself. And that's not it at all. Big P purpose is goal oriented, but the reason why big P purpose is bad is not just the goals, it's because your satisfaction and your joy are only related to the goals. So if you take a big audacious idea, like I'm a podcaster and I want to have 1 million downloads every month for my podcast, that sounds big and audacious. But if I love every moment of building up that podcast and the marketing and those things bring joy in me, I've won whether I hit my goal or I don't hit my goal. So that's little P purpose, even though I have a big audacious goal. You have to be a little bit goal agnostic. You can have goals and they can even be big audacious goals, but if you're not enjoying the process, if you're not enjoying it whether you win or you lose, you want to enjoy being in the arena, not only being victorious. And so if you can get to that place, you can have really big, impactful dreams that form your little P purpose. But if you start doing things you hate and you don't enjoy the process of, and it starts feeling anxiety provoking to meet that goal, like if I decided I wanted 1 million downloads a month and I started doing TikTok and Instagram, things I hate and I don't enjoy and I feel bad about, well, then I've kind of lost my way. Then it really is big P purpose and it doesn't feel good anymore. And I'm spending all this time doing stuff I don't like for the dream of hitting a goal, which will make me happy for a short period of time. And then I'll either double down or I'll get afraid that I'm going to lose my 1 million downloads and it's going to like make me more frantic than ever. You have to enjoy the process. So no, do your little P purpose, but don't be afraid to also do the hard things. Like maybe you want to take your spreadsheet knowledge and begin a business that actually is very commercially successful or provides employment for 1,000 people. And that's a big, audacious dream. But as long as you're enjoying the process of doing it, if you're in the arena fighting the valiant fight, it doesn't matter whether you end up victorious or you end up barely lifting your head off the ground. Both of those are just as good as long as you're enjoying that valiant fight.
I love that.
Yeah, I think we had a comment on YouTube. I did struggle whether, Summer says, I did struggle whether my gardening business was changing the world enough. And it took a lot to let myself try it, but I feel content now. And I think there's a lot of pressure to change more than you don't have to.
Well, not only that, but I would argue the exact opposite. You're much more likely to change the world's little P purpose than big P purpose. I can give you tons of examples, but let me give you the example of myself. I went into being a physician, a doctor. People are like, well, that is full of impact, right? So when I was a doctor, I probably could, generously help 1,000 people a year, right? I'd see a bunch of patients and let's say I was 100% effective. I could help 1,000, 2,000 people a year. And I did that for 10 years. And then I burnt out and I left it and I started filling my life with little P purpose, doing things that I enjoyed, even though, maybe it helped people, maybe it wouldn't, but I was doing it because I loved it. So I started blogging, I started podcasting, and then I started writing books. Well, my podcast has been downloaded like 4.5, 5 million times. My books have been read by tens of thousands of people. I am impacting way more people than I ever impacted as a doctor. But it wasn't my purpose. That isn't why I did it. It was a happy side effect. So I truly believe if you engage in little P purpose and do what lights you up, it will change the world because that's when you're truly giving your true gifts to other people. I think when you set up and you're like, I want to have a big impact, so I'm going to become an influencer or I'm going to do whatever, or I'm going to become a New York Times bestseller, whatever it is. I don't know if that really, if you happen to succeed, because most people won't at those big audacious things, but if you happen to succeed, I'm not sure that impact is any bigger or better than it will be by just being yourself. And I have a very long story, if you'd like me to talk about my maternal grandfather, who I think is a perfect example of this. But if the example of my own podcasting was enough, we don't have to go any further.
No, it's a great example. And I think you're right. If you're out there living on passion and purpose and doing things, then you will create change. And yeah, I always spoke about business. Sometimes the profit is the side effect. It's not. So if you do the business really well, or you launch something you really love and you're doing it really well and helping people and creating impact, then profit is the side effect, not the goal. which sounds a similar thing. Did I make that up?
No, no, I think it is. And I think your impact and legacy will be a happy side effect, but I think it will far outlast even your time on this earth. And so do things that light you up, whether you mean to or not, you are going to affect other people, and there's an impact that will continue long after you're gone.
We had a question from SRF who says, I'd love to hear your reflections on what hospice people say about their health and their health choices.
That's interesting. I don't know if people talk a lot about that by the time they hit hospice. It's kind of, they're at a point where it's kind of known. Um, Again, I don't hear a lot of people saying, man, I wish I smoked less and wouldn't have gotten lung cancer. Even I wish I drank less. They much more say, I wish I was more true to myself. You'd be amazed. It's not, I wish I didn't do this behavior that caused me to get sick. It's more, I wish I lived up to more of who I really thought I should be or could have been. Um, and people talk about that a heck of a lot more than they do about their bad health choices.
Interesting.
That is fascinating because, yeah, perhaps the thing that got them there is not what they regret. That's fascinating. Yeah. Hmm. We had a question from Dawn. She said, apart from your job, what was your biggest change when you found your purpose?
There were so many changes. I mean, for one, I became just a happier person. Again, I didn't really find purpose. I had to build a life of purpose, right? So I built lots of purpose around blogging, podcasting, writing, but even smaller things like taking long walks on the lake and reading. I love to read fiction. So I spend about 2 hours a day reading fiction, like exercising. So a few things. Time started feeling much more abundant because there was just so much more time in the day. I feel like I was much more engaged. I made new friends. Like I was a doctor and I didn't love being a doctor because that identity didn't fit me. I had no doctor friends. I literally had no doctor friends. I worked in hospitals my whole life. I worked in offices. When I discovered financial independence, started podcasting and blogging, like I have more friends now than I've ever had because I'm kind of being a little bit more true to myself. So I connect with people more because the things that light me up light a lot of my friends up, right? In this personal finance community, I have friends who are authors, friends who are podcasters, friends who are public speakers, friends who are bloggers. All of us are kind of deeply philosophical. And so I didn't have that when I was in medicine. And so my life is incredibly different. Like I'm probably happier than I've ever been. So I have the belief that, you have a happiness set point. I probably was a 5, right? And I don't think you can just like you're genetically set. I don't think you can get to a 10. But I think if you live a better, more purposeful life, you probably could go from a 5 to a 7. And I'm definitely much more close to a 7 than I ever was when I was doing all these things that just weren't congruent with who I was. Um, so I find that life is much different.
What do we have to do to you to get you to an 8?
That's a good question. I don't feel particular anxiety about that. Like, I feel like happier than I've pretty much ever been. I feel like I have more direction than I've ever had. I certainly feel like I've had more free time than I've ever had. But, we're also biological, chemical individuals. Like, our amounts of dopamine and norepinephrine and serotonin in our brains decide to go up and decide to go down. And sometimes we have very little control over that. So I'm not a perfectionist and I'm not even a huge over optimizer. I'm more of an acceptor. Like I kind of accept where I am. And so I can look at the last 10 years and say, wow, I've made really great progress with my happiness. But, that doesn't mean that I should be making more. It's more kind of like I've been able to optimize enough, but I'm a big fan of the 80/20 rule. I think once you get past the 80% benefit, I don't know if the returns are worth the extra 20% of the work.
So
Interesting.
I'm curious, Jordan, you talked about you're not so much of an optimizer, you kind of accept. Do you plan your days, your weeks, your months to have those little p purpose moments? Like, or has it become second nature now that it's just a part of your life?
Yeah.
How did that come about?
So, I mean, basically at this point in my life, everything I'm engaged with is something that's little p purpose, right? So I work in a hospice and we have a weekly meeting every either Wednesday or Thursday, depending on the week, from 9 to 12. So already I've anchored my week in something that I have to show up and do that's very purposeful and exciting for me, but just also it anchors kind of I develop habits and I develop a schedule and routine. And to me, that feels very good. But so I call this grounding, right? This is another concept which I talk about in my new book. Um, Grounding is the process of taking the things that bring you meaning into the past and integrating them into your present and future in your purpose. So, grounding for me is I was a doctor. I grew up in hospitals. My father was a doctor. So, I like to write in the mornings, and I'm writing a new book, which is Little P Purpose for me. But one of the ways I do that is they were doing work on my house. We were doing a bunch of remodeling. So I got in the habit of I walk over to the hospital that's a few blocks from my house that I used to work at, and I sit in the cafeteria there and I write. And so I'm grounding my day in this connection to medicine and my father and something, the sounds and sights of the hospital, which even though I decided that didn't feel like purpose anymore, still I feel very connected to. And so usually I'll do that for an hour or two, and then I'll leave the hospital and walk to the lake, which is another 2 blocks away. And walking down the lake, I feel deeply connected to the city I live in. This is a place I was born. I feel deeply connected to Northwestern University, where I went to medical school, and Northwestern University's campus is right there on the lake. And so little p purpose as well as meaning permeate most of what I do, most of my days. And I say it grounds me in my past because I'm connected to the joyous, important things of my past, but it also stabilizes me in my present and future in my sense of purpose because it allows me to even pursue purpose further, but in kind of a safe and connected way, if that makes sense. And so I don't feel like I have to plan these moments of little p purpose. I just think that now my daily activities are so imbued with them and so imbued with a sense of meaning based on what's been important to me my whole life and kind of the themes and the stories of my life have kind of intertwined that I think it just all connects. I think it's a little bit less planned, maybe I should say.
A couple of people said, would you mind giving the definition of grounding again for us? Just explain to us what that is.
So, believe it or not, there is a psychological term called grounding, and I've kind of modified it. So, if you look at the psychology data, grounding is the sense of like when people get anxiety or experience things like trauma, grounding is the process of feeling your place in space and time. So it's like noticing the ground on your feet or noticing the wind against your hands or noticing your breathing. That was how people in general have talked about grounding in psychology. My version, what I've talked a lot about, is grounding ourselves in our past and our sense of meaning. So, meaning, in my opinion, are the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. Meaning is a deeply cognitive thing about the past. It's the way we interpret our past. Purpose is about our present and future, and it's about activity. So I think of them as very different things. Meaning is about our thinking and it's about our past. Purpose is about our present and future, and it's about actions. Grounding is the process of connecting to our past, our stories, our narratives, the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, and living that in the present and future. It's the awareness of things that give you meaning in your everyday life. So going to the hospital is deeply meaningful. It connects me to the stories about my past and my father, about being a doctor, about both the good and the bad things. And so when I go to write my book, which is the present and future and its little p purpose, and I do it in the hospital cafeteria, I'm grounded in this deep sense of meaning. Or when I walk along the lake, and walking for me is little p purpose. I'll throw on a podcast, which I love to listen to podcasts, or I'll throw on some classical music and I'll walk along the lake. And that's a very little p purpose, purposeful thing in the present, here and now. But it's very grounded in my history and my connection to the past. And so that's how I think of grounding. It's more of a cognitive grounding instead of a sensory grounding. So I would define the other version of grounding as sensory. It's in touch and in noticing things around you, where I'm talking more of a cognitive grounding about cognitively connecting to your past and the things that are meaningful for you in your present day. Does that make sense? I know it's a little complicated.
Well, I think we should ask. Yeah, we've got thumbs up. Dorothy was giving us thumbs up, so I feel like
Good. So
Dorothy,
this,
so Keisha gave us a thumbs up. So did Roseanne.
SRF asked for the definition again, so let's get feedback from SRF as
Yes.
to if that.
Please let us know in the chat if that made sense, because yeah, we want to know. Okay, we're getting a few 100%. We're getting a few comments coming in. Okay, it looks like we nailed it, Jordan.
good, good. I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
I love it.
Jenny says, do you have any advice on how to stay motivated to keep trying different things to find that sense of purpose and connection?
So I think there are a few things to motivation. And in fact, this goes back to what I just talked about, meaning and purpose. One thing I've learned is a lot of people have a meaning problem and it really messes with their ability to pursue purpose. So what do I mean by that? Meaning, as I said, is our cognitive understanding of the past. It's the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, and it's usually rooted in trauma. So what I mean by that is kids, we have these adverse childhood experiences. They call them ACEs in the psychology literature. And a lot of times we develop habits and ideas based on childhood trauma, whether big or small, whether it was, God forbid, a family member died, like my father died, versus being made fun in the schoolyard. All of those can qualify as adverse childhood experiences. And we react to them. And so some people react to them and tell themselves a hero story. So they say, well, I had this bad thing, it happened in childhood, but I got over it and I was enough and I was able to move on. And I've generally been a successful person. So that's kind of a hero story you tell about your past. And that's really, really healthy. But then some people tell themselves a victim story about their past. Like I had this trauma, it thwarted me. And a lot of times they don't feel enough. And so when they come to the present future and they start trying to pursue purpose, they don't feel enough. And so purpose becomes this anxiety provoking thing where they're like, the bigger, the better the purpose, the more it's going to prove to myself I'm enough. And it's going to fill that hole from my childhood trauma. And people try and it doesn't work. I always talk about Elon Musk. I know some people really love Elon Musk. Elon Musk is the poster child for someone who has a meaning problem and he's trying to purpose his way to enough and it doesn't work. Like he's the richest guy ever. He's created some of the best tech ever and he looks fairly miserable at least some of the time. He should be dancing in the streets all of the time. But he also had a really traumatic childhood where his dad was rough on him. He got kind of abused at summer camp and all these kind of things. And if you read his biographies, like he probably doesn't feel enough somewhere deep down inside. And he keeps on trying to use purpose to get there and it just doesn't work. And so what happens when you're asking about motivation for purpose? Well, one of two things. I think if you start with little simple things that are little p purpose, they energize and motivate. So the key is find something small that you enjoy doing and form a habit around it. Like, do you enjoy sitting with your coffee as the sun rises, reading poetry? You know, do that for 5 minutes every day. And I think by just the practice, the habit of doing it, you're going to start building some energy and motivation towards it. But that only works if you're not trying to prove your enoughness by purpose. So if you're like, well, I can't sit and read poetry because that's not going to have an impact or legacy. That's not going to prove how great I am. I need to build a business or make $1 billion or those kind of things. Like you're going to feel bad if that's what you're feeling. And it's going to be either A, very hard to motivate, or you're going to be super motivated, but never happy with whatever your results are. And so if you have a meaning problem, the way to deal with that is you have to go back and either get therapy or work through some of the trauma and some of the story you tell yourself about yourself. There's something called narrative therapy where you actually rewrite some of those childhood narratives. And so if that's your issue, if you're having a meaning issue, you have to kind of deal with the past. If you don't have a meaning issue, then it's a matter of building some habits and doing some very easy versions of little p purpose to kind of get things going.
It's probably a virtuous cycle, isn't it? You said that it gives you energy
Yes.
and do more than like, why would you not?
So here's what's really beautiful about it. It's a virtuous cycle. And I found over and over again, when people pursue their little p purpose, it tends to bleed into their workplace. And so when I started getting tired of medicine, I started writing and I wrote a blog and that caught people's attention. And I got asked to write blog posts and get paid $500 a month to write a blog post a month for a medical website that was selling a medical product. So all of a sudden, it became part of my job and career to do something that was little p purpose. But that's because I showed up and did it and it connected me to other people. And someone read my blog and was like, I like what you're writing and I want you to come write for our site and here's some money. I have countless other examples of when people outside of work pursued little p purpose, but it eventually worked its way into their job. And so they were able to do, remember what we talked about before, win the game because they subtracted out something they didn't like at work and replaced it with something they did, a little bit of little p purpose. And so you start winning. So it is a virtuous cycle. Start doing things you love to do, and it will bleed into all the parts of your life.
It really does. It really does. I have loved this conversation, Jordan, and you have given us so much. If you were going to set the audience, the Fabulous Rebel Finance School audience, homework, we've rebranded it as Freedom Work because mostly we talk about buying your freedom. But if you were to set them freedom work, what would you tell people to do? What would you have them go off and do or think or, yeah, what would be the freedom work for today?
A few concepts. One, purpose is abundant. And just because you haven't known how to pursue it in the past doesn't mean you can't learn now. Purpose is abundant and it's easy. It's literally a process of finding your purpose anchors and starting to build activities around them. The finding the anchors is surprisingly easy. The building activities around them is a little harder because you have to step out of your comfort zone and do something uncomfortable, right? Whenever we want change, whenever we want something new, if you want a different outcome, you have to try doing something different. And if you try doing something different, you are stepping out of your comfort zone into a zone of discomfort. And so you should just expect that. But that's where growth occurs. So the action's a little bit harder than figuring out the purpose anchors, but purpose is abundant and easy. There's no reason for you not to start pursuing it, regardless of what's going on in your life. For at least 99%. Yes, 1% are living such stressful lives right now that they can't handle that. I buy it, that's fine. But for 99% of us, something little. Start building a little purpose into your life. Win the game, Alan. Win the game.
In the game. I love it. One of my favorite expressions is everything you want in life is outside your comfort zone. Otherwise, you'd already have it. Because if you were comfortable getting it, you would just go and get it. So by definition, you have to get uncomfortable. So who's up for getting uncomfortable with us? Keisha put her hand up.
Yeah,
I saw Keisha put her hand up. Yeah, Roseanne put her hand up.
We're holding you to that.
Yeah,
now.
we're definitely, Keisha, you're getting an email afterwards. Let's get uncomfortable. Sounds a bit weird. But
So, Jordan, perhaps you can remind us, do a short summary of those different ways of doing the purpose, finding your purpose.
Anchors. So I mentioned 4 of them. There's the regret audit. If you were on your deathbed, what would you regret never having the energy, courage, or time to do? Let's turn that into some purpose. There's the joys of childhood. What did you love as a kid? There's the art of subtraction. Get rid of all you loathe at work. What's left over? And then if all else fails, the spaghetti method, throw a bunch of things up against the wall and see what sticks.
I love that. That's so easy and actionable to do. Who's going to do that? Give me a why in the chat or put in the comments. Are you actually going to do this freedom work that Jordan has done? Jordan has set you to actually improve your lives and have that little p purpose that will bleed's not a good word, but bleed into the rest of your life. What's a better word than bleed, Alan?
Spread happiness. Infect the rest of your life with happiness, definitely. Keisha says, how do I do a regret audit?
So the simple regret audit is literally the simple sentence. If I found out I was dying next week, what would I really regret never having the energy, courage, or time to do? And fill in the blank.
I love that.
Those become purpose anchors.
I love that. We are getting a huge more yeses. Martin says he's off to percolate for a bit. I think maybe he's reimagined his story as with my tea.
I think he's trying to help me with my bleed. He's saying maybe it percolates into the rest of life.
Okay. Al Hanley says there's a lot of little p purposeful pineapples coming at us because pineapples, Jordan. Dawn says maybe I'll go and do it. I'm more likely now, which is a fantastic moving towards. Hannah's off to do the regret audit. Anne is saying I'm going to write my own obituary, what I'd like it to say, which I think
similar.
is
similar.
Fantastic.
You could then leave that on the side for whoever does eventually, do obituary or eulogy.
Do me a favor, don't just write your obituary, but next to it, write your aspirational obituary, because there you go. Compare the two. Like, what are you today and what's aspirational? And that again may help you decide. But make sure that the aspirations are, in my opinion, little p purpose. So it's not, I want to win the Nobel Prize because I want to change 3 million people's lives. I want you to be more granular. Like, what do you want to study? And we'll let you up to study that thing that may one day win you the Nobel Prize or whatever it is.
I love it. Anna said, I had a spaghetti phase a few weeks ago, trying a bunch of creative classes to see what I liked.
Mm. Uh, Spoonsby's like, this could lead to 1,000 things to do before I die.
Which is cool, right? If it's 1,000 things and you're never going to get through the
And
list.
the dartboard. It doesn't matter. Remember, it doesn't matter which of them you do. Do something that lights you up. It's going to connect you to other people. And that's where the real happiness comes.
Does this relate to bucket lists as well, Jordan? What are your thoughts on bucket lists?
So, I'm in between. Here's what I think. Let's talk about the continuum of, I'm trying to say how to say this. I used to have a better way of saying this. Let's talk about the continuum of things or actions that make you happy. So the cheapest way to make yourself happy is to buy something, right? Spend a lot of money. You'll be happy for a few minutes or a few hours, but we all know about hedonic adaptation. It disappears, right? So that is the cheapest way. The next cheaper way, but not as cheap, is by experiences. So it is true. Like, you can go and have and this is what bucket lists are. You can go out and do this experience and it can make you happy. You can be excited about doing it. You can be excited while you're doing it. You can have excited memories. But it generally is somewhat still short term, and you'll run, like, you can only go to so many, Mount Vesuviuses. You can only do so many things. There's always a million possibilities. So that's kind of better than just buying your way into happiness or buying your way into short-term happiness. But I still think it doesn't quite scratch the itch. I think if you really want to scratch the itch, it's becoming the person you want to be. And so, yeah, you can travel to a million bucket list places, but what you're really trying to say is, even if you don't have enough money, you want to become the kind of person who even travels around their city and goes to new neighborhoods and meets new people and does new things. So I'd rather you buy things that help you become a better version of who you want to be. I'd rather have you experience things and have bucket list items that help you become the better version of who you want to be. But I think where true happiness lies is actually becoming a better version of yourself. And so that's what I'd really love to get people to focus on. The rest is a little bit more ephemeral. I think it's a little bit more short term.
I absolutely
Yeah,
love that.
I love that distinction. Yeah, become who you want to be, and that is true happiness, because you can feel proud of who you are and who you've become and the obstacles that you overcame to be the person that you chose to be.
Yeah.
Now we can just sit in silence, because that's it.
That's it.
You're done.
That's a
Just go
mic
do
drop.
that.
We're done.
We're done. Jordan, you have been absolutely incredible tonight. We have loved the conversation. We have loved your energy, and you have lit us up with your energy, your ideas, and your thoughts. We're very excited to, lots of people have commented about lining up your books and reading them. We're very excited to hear you're writing another one as well, which we're looking forward to reading as well. And if you would like more of Jordan, please listen to the Earn and Invest podcast. It is fantastic. There is lots on there for you. You may hear an episode with the Revolutionaries with the Earn and Invest song as well, which you can find on there. And this has been a fantastic session, because money is an incredible tool. And at Rebel Finance School, we spend a lot of time talking about how do you create a gap, invest your money so it's growing for you. But really, we're just growing the tool that can help you do more with your time, become more of who you wanted to be, and have more time with the people you love. That's the whole game of this. So please, everyone, give a huge round of applause to Mr. Jordan Grummett, Earn and Invest
Thank
podcast,
you.
author, inspiring person, and lovely guy.
It's just lovely, isn't it?
He's just lovely.
Thank you so much for having me. And one last thought. Right here, this is Alan, Katie, and I doing our little P purpose. And so if you take any of this home with you and you buy the book or you talk to someone about it, or it changes how you live your life, That's impact, that's legacy. And we all got here, not because it was going to make us $1 million, but we all got here because this is joyful, regardless of what comes out of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've just had a fabulous evening. It's just been a wonderful evening. It's-
I
A
love
bunch
your-
of good friends.
I love your presumption that I enjoyed this, Jordan. Your presumption, correct. And I love the presumption.
It's easier when you presume such things.
It definitely is. It definitely is.
Melanie says, I've loved all the sessions in Rebel Finance School this year, but this one has felt really special. Thank you so much, Jordan.
Yeah.
Like it's
Awesome.
it's a lovely way to, like, we're coming to the end of the bonus sessions of Rebel Finance School, and this is, I feel like this is perfect timing for you to come and talk to people about this. So we really appreciate you having you here, Jordan.
Yeah, we really.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me so much. And thank you, everybody, for coming.
And for everyone who's still here, we have a wrap-up Q&A, which is coming on Thursday. So Thursday this week, we're doing the wrap-up Q&A with the last questions, all of the questions that you've got about Rebel Finance School. Then the next Thursday, we have an Ask the Donegans Anything session. So you can grill us about why Alan is into Lego and carries it around the world with him. You can grill us about why Katie is so crazy about spreadsheets. Anything you want to ask us, you can ask us about that. So we have that final session. And then watch out for an announcement in the next few days. The original sort of business that I started was called Rebel Business School, which was about making money through your passion. Can you actually live that little p purpose that Jordan talked about and make money at the same time? And we're going to be announcing in a few weeks or a few days the new version of Rebel Business School. They are going to model what we've done at Rebel Finance School and do it on Monday nights in the evenings. So there'll be the first ever evening version of Rebel Business School will be coming out very soon. So if you need to create a side hustle, earn some more money, do something like that, then we have that coming for you in the next few weeks, which is going to be a lot of
Well,
fun.
a lot of people say, what am I going to do on Monday nights now? Well, we have the next thing lined up for you. And if you're watching this on Catch Up, that also will be available on Catch Up as well.
For the first time ever, they've never done that. It's never been done in an evening. It's always been the daytime, and it's never been done on Catch Up. So we're very proud to see them creating that and putting it out there. And we will be delivering 2 of the sessions as well. So it'll be great fun. We're doing the tax and accounting and company structure section. Like, what else would you think we would be doing? And the money mindset session as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
You're doing the opening session with Simon as well.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I am. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So that brings us to the end of tonight's session. Hopefully see you for Thursday's Q&A and then the Ask Us Anything Q&A with the Donegans. We have loved having you here. It comes to the time where we say good night, YouTube. So YouTubers, thank you for coming. Ruth the Happy Saver, Al Hansby, Spoonsy, What's It All About, Robin Valeria, What's It All About, Gillian, Amanda, Teresa, Fireman with all of his comments. If you haven't read Fireman's comments on YouTube, they make my day every time. He's now asking us if we will be producing merch. Maybe one day we will. We got some revolutionary t-shirts for ourselves, but who knows? So thank you everyone on YouTube. Thank you for coming. You are amazing. We love having you here. See you for the Q&As and see you soon. Good night, YouTube.
Bye-bye, YouTube.
Bye-bye, YouTube. Okay, I've ended the stream. Everyone is safe to swear now.